On June 27, President Donald Trump took to Truth Social to announce that, based on this egregious tax, we are hereby terminating all discussions on trade with Canada, effective immediately, calling Canada's new 3% digital services tax a direct and blatant attack on our country, and warning that the U.S. would levy retaliatory tariffs within 7 days. This abrupt decision marked a sharp reversal in relations between two of the world's largest trading partners and instantly set off a flurry of reactions across the U.S. and Canada political spectrum. Let's begin with comments from American politicians, then move on to Canadian leadership. We'll also conclude with a discussion of countries that implement similar taxes, including the amounts and procedures they have in place. Within the Republican establishment, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent signaled that the administration may launch a Section 301 investigation to justify roughly $2 billion in retaliatory tariffs, a move aimed at demonstrating firmness toward what the White House views as an unfair levy on American technology firms. The Computer and Communications Industry Association, CCIA Research Center, projects that Canada's 3% DST will inflict annual losses of between $900 million and $2.3 billion on U.S. technology firms, including potential retroactive payments dating back to 2022. Because the tax applies retroactively to digital services revenues from January 1, 2022, affected firms face lump sum bills covering 3 years by June 30, 2025. The CCIA warns this could translate into up to 3,000 U.S. job losses across the sector unless a negotiated solution is found. Meanwhile, trade associations aligned with U.S. tech companies warned of the broader risks. In a recent filing, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce argued that Canada's tax would inevitably be passed on to consumers and could violate obligations under the USMCA, underscoring the need for protective measures. By contrast, several Senate and House Democrats cautioned that cutting off negotiations could backfire. Congressman Stephen Horsford, DNV, denounced the decision as counterproductive, arguing that halting talks risked harming U.S. exporters and driving up costs for American consumers. Earlier this spring, a bipartisan Senate resolution had already sought to curb the president's unilateral tariff powers, reflecting deep concern in both parties about the economic fallout from abrupt trade actions. Across the border, Ottawa's response was measured but firm. Prime Minister Mark Carney's office stated simply that the Canadian government will continue to engage in these complex negotiations with the United States in the best interests of Canadian workers and businesses, signaling a desire to keep channels open despite the U.S. freeze. Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne reiterated that the tax could be negotiated as part of broader U.S.-Canada trade discussions, reminding Washington that the DST was designed to apply revenue earned since January 2022, and that the first payments, totaling about $2 billion, are due on June 30th. In an interview with Fox News Digital, Frank McKenna, former Canadian ambassador to the U.S., stated that Trump's unexpected decision to end trade talks with Canada highlights how difficult this is going to be. It's an extraordinary action by a neighbor and trading partner, and it just demonstrates how unpredictable and chaotic the United States is under President Trump, said McKenna, who currently serves as chairman of Brookfield Corp. And deputy chair of TD Securities. Business and provincial leaders in Canada also weighed in. Goldie Hyder, CEO of the Business Council of Canada, urged a pragmatic swap. In an effort to get trade negotiations back on track, Canada should put forward an immediate proposal to eliminate the DST in exchange for an elimination of tariffs from the United States, he said, warning that unilateral taxes undermine the bilateral economic relationship. Even as Ottawa defended its policy, opposition voices pressed the government to stand firm. With trust eroded on both sides, the path forward remains uncertain. The U.S. may proceed with a formal Section 301 inquiry, while Canada debates whether to amend or delay its DST. Stakeholders from Ottawa to Washington are now bracing for a protracted battle over digital taxation, one that could reshape not only bilateral trade, but also the emerging global rules governing the digital economy. As mentioned, Canada is not the only country which has such a tax. Let's quickly review other countries with similar tax in a bit of details. The United Kingdom brought in a 2% digital services tax on April 1, 2020, applying to gross revenues from social media platforms, internet search engines, and online marketplaces that derive value from UK users. It applies where a group's worldwide digital revenues exceed £500 million, and its annual UK digital revenues exceed £25 million, though the first £25 million of UK receipts are exempt. Loss-making groups may elect an alternative margin-based safe harbor. Similarly, France's GAFA tax, signed into law on July 24, 2019, and retroactive to January 1, 2019, imposes a 3% levy on revenues from digital interface services, targeted advertising, and user data monetization. It applies only to companies with global turnover above €750 million and French source revenues exceeding €25 million. In Italy, a 3% digital services tax came into effect on January 1, 2020, for groups with worldwide revenues of at least €750 million, and Italian digital services receipts over €5.5 million. Under the 2025 budget law, the €5.5 million local threshold was removed as of January 1, 2025, so that any company with global revenues above €750 million is subject to the tax on gross consideration for platform-based services, advertising, and data transmission to Italian users. Meanwhile, Turkey introduced one of the steepest digital levies at 7.5% in March 2020, targeting gross revenues from online advertising, digital content sales, and platform services. It applies only if global in-scope revenues exceed €750 million and in-country revenues surpass $20 million in the previous year. Over in Asia, India's 2016 equalization levy began as a 6% withholding tax on online advertising by non-resident providers, targeting Indian users, and was broadened in April 2020 to a 2% levy on e-commerce supplies and digital services. The 2% levy was abolished effective August 1, 2024, and the 6% advertising levy was subsequently removed from April 1, 2025, reflecting India's commitment to the OECD Pillar 1 negotiations. Elsewhere in Europe, Poland applies a 1.5% tax on revenues of foreign streaming and audiovisual services, effective July 2020. It kicks in for undertakings with global digital revenues above €750 million and Polish source revenues over €5 million, with proceeds earmarked to bolster local media and film production. Finally, Spain's 3% DST became effective January 16, 2021, covering online advertising, intermediary marketplace services, and user data sales. It applies to digital revenues in Spain exceeding €3 million, when the ultimate parent group's worldwide turnover is at least €750 million. Although details vary, particularly in scope, rate, and revenue thresholds, each of these unilateral measures shares Canada's fundamental premise of taxing gross digital revenues attributable to local users. As international talks under the OECD/G20 Pillar 1 framework advance, many of these DSTs are expected to serve as interim safeguards until a multilateral consensus on profit-based allocation is reached. Thank you for watching. As an independent channel, we don't have corporate backing. We rely on your support to keep going. If you found this video valuable, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below.